Hello and welcome back to Mystery of Israel Radio. I'm Tom Quinlan, your host, and soon we're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 11. But today we're going to do a rerun of episode 9, which we had called Seek Him While He May Be Found. We just want to go over why we're in the book of Daniel in the first place. Archives of these messages can be found at zionchristianpress.org/radio. In the book of Daniel, we're going to find a framework for lining up all the prophetic events of Bible history. We're going to find the key to not being deceived as the events of the climax of the age unfold. Jesus himself sent us to the book of Daniel when he was asked in Matthew chapter 24, when his disciples asked, "What shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world, or the end of the age?" After he gave some details as to things to look for, he said in chapter 24, verse 14, "This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. And then shall the end come. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place." When you see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place, the one spoken of by the prophet Daniel, whoso readeth, let him understand. And the way I understand this is, if you want to know more about this abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, go to the book of Daniel. Then let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. Verse 21, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." This is a time, whatever he's speaking of here, and the context is the end of the age, that there shall be a time of unequaled tribulation. Great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Unequaled tribulation. When is there going to be unequaled tribulation? When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. Has this time already passed? Is this a fulfilled prophetic event? Well, Matthew chapter 24, verse 29 says, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days." What days? When there shall be great tribulation. Verse 21. "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." It doesn't sound like a silent event that goes unnoticed by anyone. So this is what Christians call the second coming of the Lord, the return of the Lord. he went away to his place, as we read in Hosea chapter 5. I will go and return to my place until they acknowledge their offense and seek my face in their affliction, great tribulation. In their affliction, they will seek me early. Come, let us return to the Lord, they say. For he has torn, and he will heal us. He has smitten, he will bind us up after 2 days. A day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. After 2 days he will revive us. In the third day, the third 1,000 years, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. So this abomination that causes desolation, since we are in the book of Hosea, if you followed me there, just flip back a page or two to the very last chapter of Daniel. So we're going to start at the end and work our way back. We're going to slow down a little bit, and we're going to take some time in Daniel. But this abomination that causes desolation is actually mentioned in the last chapter. So it's a chapter that's only 13 verses long. The mention is actually towards the end in verse 11. From the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So anyway, let's back up to the beginning of the chapter, because there's some great marker points here. And it says in verse 1, and we're not going to go into much detail here, but it says, "At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of your people," Daniel. "And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was, since there was a nation, even to that same time." Great tribulation, unequaled tribulation. "At that time your people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." This is what we call the resurrection of the dead. Great tribulation, the resurrection of the dead, the return of the Lord. They're all compressed into one very short time period. Remember in Matthew 24, Jesus said, "After the tribulation of those days, then they will see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven." There is a time of great tribulation that is going to end with the coming of the Lord, with a great shout, the resurrection of the dead, the rapture, if you will, the transformation of those that remain, and the restoration of your people, Daniel. Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. "They that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, "How long shall it be to the end of these wonders?" And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time, And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waits and comes to the 1,335 days. But you go your way until the end be, for thou shalt rest, you shall die and rest, and stand in thy lot at the end of days. So this passage is clearly talking about the same time period that we've been talking about for weeks, if not months. A time of great tribulation, the time of sifting. God is sifting the nations. God is sifting Israel. Israel is in the land. It is the time of the return of the Lord. It is the time of the resurrection of the dead. It is the time of the restoration of the nation of Israel. It is the time of the rapture of the church. And Daniel is mentioning a time period here. He said in verse 7, time, times, and half a time. He said in verse 11, 1,290 days. These are roughly 3.5 years. Those 3.5 years started with the abomination that makes desolate, standing in the temple. When you see the abomination that makes desolate standing in the temple, the one spoken of by Daniel the prophet, then what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be a part of the darkness? Or are you going to be like a shining star? One who is trusting in their God. One who has found the secret place of rest. Now is the time. Now is the time to find the rest of the Lord. Don't wait until the flood comes in. Take time now. Hear his voice. Turn to him. Repent of living for yourself alone. Open the book. Learn of his glory. Until next time, this is Mystery of Israel Radio.